What's up, and welcome to another live stream with Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we're taking a close look at benchmark and detailed testing, gameplay as well. We've got 10 games here that we're going to be testing, as well as this is about 10 benchmarks that are synthetic tests designed to tell you how powerful and how efficient and how good the Intel Core Ultra 9 285H is. Now, this is the flagship CPU for thinner, high-performance gaming laptops. So there is more powerful CPUs on the market in the HX lineup from Intel. Those have more cores, more threads, and they're going to need a much beefier cooling system. So this is really designed to fit into thinner laptops that can go very thin, actually, like super, super tiny and super thin. And those will have even lower power limits than the laptop we're testing today. We're using the Ideapad Pro 5i for today's testing, which we're going to dive into more in detail here in a moment. Now, I am going to just make sure that the live stream looks good. What's up, Mr. Johnny? Appears people are hopping in. Welcome to the live stream. I'm really excited today about testing this new Core Ultra 9 285H, primarily because this is utilizing the new TSMC 3nm process for the CPUs, which should mean that they should be much more powerful for the amount of watts going through the CPU, at least in theory. In actual practice, you know, there's other things going on here that maybe limit us a little bit, but for battery life, it definitely can make a huge impact, as well as power, performance per watt basically can also make a big difference, which we're not going to really be taking a look at that as much as just overall performance and overall gameplay. Now, the big thing, I think probably the biggest upgrade with the 285H is the new Intel Arc 140T GPU that's attached to the Intel integrated CPU. So basically, this is the integrated graphics that is capable of actually gaming, and gaming at a much higher throughput. I mean, Intel says it's only a 20% performance gain from the previous generation of Intel Arc, but in actuality, I'm seeing in my preliminary testing 35 to 40% maybe. I don't know, depends a lot on the game. Some games have big performance improvements, some games not as much. So to start off with, we're going to be taking a look at the specs, and Mustafa says, I need you to stop watching it. You make me lose money. LOL. So Intel did horrible on desktop. 14th gen still better in games. So Intel, a lot of people know the Intel desktop CPUs just did not perform as well as what Intel had promised or claimed or what, I don't know. I didn't test the desktop CPUs. I'm focusing mainly on laptops here on this channel, but I know that the Intel CPUs on the desktop side are struggling a bit compared to the AMD. But I feel like within the laptop segment, we're actually seeing really competitive comeback here from Intel, at least in my preliminary testing. I haven't done all the tests and I haven't done all the comparisons side by side yet. But I was very impressed with some of my early numbers, and I think Intel may be making a huge comeback here in terms of performance. Now, I do have my previous test that I did very recently, only about 2 months ago. I did a Core Ultra 9 185H, which is the previous generation from Intel. You can see all the results, and you can see that AMD basically swept Intel in the vast majority. It was like 80%. AMD wins, AMD wins, AMD wins, AMD wins. Intel won the Handbrake test. And then, yeah, AMD won most of the games as well. I believe all of the games by a sizable margin. You can see all the different frame rates here. We're going to be comparing today, does Intel actually beat the Ryzen AI 9 HX370 versus the 285H, which is the one in the Lenovo Ideapad that we'll be testing today. So I'm gonna bring these benchmarks back up again at the end, and we'll see our results. So we'll be listing in the results as we complete them throughout the live stream today. And I have high hopes that Intel will at least be much more competitive this year. So maybe trading blows, we'll see, but maybe not. Now, I do need to make a full disclaimer here as well that Intel themselves were the ones that sent me this Lenovo Ideapad Pro 5i for me to test. And this video is not sponsored, but there will be a final sponsored video from Intel on the main channel. Now, I'm going to be testing this exactly how I tested it before, which again, that video was not sponsored in the past. And the testing methodology will be exactly the same. And the results and what I say will simply be based on the data. And Intel has agreed that they'll have no editorial impact on anything that I say or do, because I only take sponsorships where I can always list all the pros and cons with my audience. So, without further ado, let's get into Intel's specs and claims, and we'll see what we think about them here as we get into this. All right, so, right, here we go. Okay, so Intel XeSS. I'm not sure if they're wanting us to change the name to just XeSS, because of DLSS, or I don't know if it's easier to say, but XeSS is their super sampling upscaling ability from AI. And they've also integrated frame generation into this, but the thing they don't really tell you so much is that there's only a couple of games, or a handful of games maybe, that support frame generation through XeSS directly. Now, you can still use lossless scaling frame generation with this chip to get frame generation in almost any game, but that's a third-party software, and it doesn't always necessarily improve performance. Anyway, but you can get 4 times multi-frame frame generation through that, which is very interesting to me. And I've been messing around with it, and it has not been the most amazing thing ever. But anyway, so where does this fit in the Core Ultra family? Intel Core Ultra 200H series fits into the performance for thin and light laptops. We have a built-in GPU as well. And the thing about this one is that this GPU, I think, takes most modern games and you can actually play them, at least in my initial testing, and play them really well with much better 1% lows and much higher average FPS. But most importantly, the 1% lows are much higher, which increases your perceived FPS dramatically. Okay, so we have Lion Cove for the performance cores, Skymont cores for the efficiency cores, and the Intel Arc with the new XMX engine. They claim 22% more frame rates or higher frame rates versus the Meteor Lake generation. We also have 99 tops for AI if you care about AI performance. We have integrated Wi-Fi 7 on here. We have AV1 media encoder support, Thunderbolt 5 support. We have 20 times PCIe Gen 5 lanes and 4 times PCIe Gen 4 lanes. Then on the performance per watt, they're claiming a 21% uplift in performance per watt. Now, the only real way I think you're going to see this is if you were to power limit the test down to like 45 watts or say 30 watts, which is what they do in this test in particular. So you can see that right here at this line is where they're claiming 100%, which I think they're saying 45 watts of performance, and so they're saying 21% performance gain at that wattage level. Now, at the high end, I don't think we're going to see 21% performance gain generation to generation, at least not in my initial testing. I did not see that much. More like 5 to 10% performance gain for multi-core performance. A leap in AI performance. This is talking about the Intel Arc GPU now. And the thing about the Intel Arc GPU is the last generation, I felt like, provided playable frame rates just barely in about half of the modern titles. And the other half, it was too juddery and too low of settings to really be able to enjoy the game and get smooth gameplay. And with this one, in almost all the modern games I tested, it was very good performance, except for Monster Hunter Wilds, which you'll see when we get to testing that one. But we've got the new XMX engine, 4 times AI throughput. You do have ray tracing units in here, though I don't think you're going to really be using ray tracing anyway in most of these games, because the game would have to be very, very lightweight to do ray tracing, because already you're struggling to get playable performance without ray tracing. You add ray tracing in, the performance is going to suffer even more. So here's an average of 22% performance gain at 1080p gaming compared to the Core Ultra 9 185H. And we'll see what we get today in our tests. We're going to test 5 games versus the 185H, and then I've got 5 extra games so that we can just test just for fun. But you can see in some of the esports title, Rocket League, Counter-Strike, Valorant, War Thunder, and League of Legends, they're all hitting over 100 FPS now. And that's very, very impressive. In terms of like, if you're an esports gamer and all you play is Counter-Strike, you probably would be just fine with this laptop now. Depending on how serious you are. If you want to have 400 FPS or something for faster reaction time, then probably not. But if you're happy with 120, you'd probably be happy with this laptop, I think, or at least over 100. Okay, so this compares enabling or disabling, XeSS, which is obviously going to, when you're using AI upscaling, it's going to massively improve performance, but they're saying up to 2 times performance gain. Now, XeSS 2 has frame generation and improved super resolution upscaling performance and a new XeLL or Xe low latency. This is supposed to improve your response rate inside of games. So, and this is from, we'll show you this in Marvel Rivals. It's pretty impressive. Turning on frame generation and the low latency feature makes it so that it feels like the input latency added from frame generation is very, very minimal. So you'll see when we get to it, but I'm pretty impressed with the low latency improvement just from the feel of playing the game with frame generation. Obviously, without frame generation and just using the super sampling is the way to get the fastest response rate, which you can see right here on this graph. If you were to natively render Marvel Rivals, you get 24 FPS without any upscaling. You add in low latency, you reduce the response rate from 110 to 78. You add in upscaling without low latency, you get to 54 milliseconds. And then you add in upscaling and low latency, you get down to 47 milliseconds. And then if you add in frame generation, you can boost the frame rate up to 69 and get only 67 milliseconds for your response rate. That's not a great response rate, but that does provide smoother gameplay. But overall, I think the majority of competitive gamers will still probably want to go for something more like this or the XeSS 2. It says this is the old version with low latency. I don't know. Anyway, overall, the low latency claims 29% latency improvement, which is a pretty big claim, So in the Core Ultra 9, we're looking at 16 cores. That's 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency cores, and 2 LP cores. And I think that it's, this is not the CPU that you want if you want the maximum possible performance in a laptop, because you're going to want to get an HX processor, which has many more cores and threads than this one. But if you want something that's portable and still high performance, then this is the processor that a lot of people target, the Core Ultra 9 285H. So, I think that covers all of the important stuff here in terms of specs for the processor and a lot of the claims. I think Intel was probably being conservative when they said 22% performance gain in video games from generation to generation, but we'll find out at least in the 5 games that we'll be testing today. Okay, and let me check chat before we continue on. Okay. All right. Cool. All right, so let us move into the Lenovo Ideapad Pro 5i, and because this is important, we are testing today with this Lenovo laptop. This is a moderately thin, it's very thin overall in terms of size. It's very portable, and yet this one also features very high wattage throughputs for the Core Ultra 9. Some of the highest wattage throughputs that you'll see, it can peak over 100 watts of power, and it can sustain around 80 to 85 watts of power over the long haul, which is very good for a laptop this thin and light. Now, keep in mind that there may be some computers that can perform slightly better than this one, but the majority of Core Ultra 9 laptops, 285H laptops, will probably have lower power limits than this one. This one's going to be on the higher end. I would imagine most 285 laptops will be more around the 45 to 60, 70 watt range in terms of more sustained performance. And that's just, I'm just stating this. This is not best case scenario, but close to best case scenario for the Core Ultra 9 285H. We've got, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual spec page for this test laptop now. So this is the page. We've got the Idea Pro 5i. Starts at $34,000. That's about $1,000 US. I'm over in Thailand now, so all my prices here are in Thai baht. But you can see the Pro 5i. If you pre-order it right now, you can get the Core Ultra 5 version with the 225H. But if we go down to the specs down here at the bottom, you can see you can order it. There will be models with the Core Ultra 9 285 version right here. 32 gigs of LPDDR5X, which we'll be testing with AIDA64 memory test. It also comes with a 1 terabyte SSD. That's a 2242, and you also get a 2280 SSD. I don't know, interesting. We're not really reviewing the laptop model as much as we are the CPU today, but I'm just trying to give you the full context so that you can understand all of the results and interpret them properly. So we have a 16-inch 2880 by 1800 OLED display, 120 hertz refresh rate. So our goal is ideally hitting that 120 hertz refresh rate, especially in esports games like Counter-Strike. 1100 nits, though I'm pretty sure the sustained is, yeah, it's going to be more like 600 or something. We're not going to be testing the display today, but just know that that's kind of what we're looking at. I think a lot of these Core Ultra 9 285Hs will have OLED 120 hertz displays on them, or maybe 60 hertz displays, if they're not particularly a gaming display, but 120 hertz. So if we're hitting 120 hertz or 120 FPS in esports titles, that's basically your ideal scenario given the onboard hardware that we're looking at. So to summarize, the Lenovo Idea Pro 5i is a high-performance Core Ultra 9 laptop with good cooling and above average wattage potential. That said, I also want to mention, pre-mention here before we get into it, I'm seeing up to 105 degrees Celsius on the CPU as the peak max temperature now. And I think we're going to see more and more laptops reaching 105 just to reach maximum possible performance. And when I've talked to production designers about this, they've basically said that the chip is perfectly safe all the way up to 105 and maybe even beyond that. And so they've just decided to raise the CPU max temperature from 100 to 105. And I think, like I said, I think we're seeing a lot of manufacturers raising that. And I think that's one of the ways that Intel's trying to compete. They're saying, hey, our CPUs are going to be fine if we raise the temp to 105. So let's just do that and get a little bit more performance out of them. Now, they're not going to sit at 105 long term. Not unless you were to use Intel XTU or something to raise the length of the turbo boost, because in my experience, the 105 temperature is just for like 10, 15, 20 seconds, and then it comes down and the wattage is reduced. And so maximum performance will boost it up to 105 degrees thermally, though, which is, I think, a little bit controversial, but as long as they've done proper safety testing, it should be perfectly safe for the CPU, as far as we know, and that's the best we can do as consumers. And then as consumers, and me being a reviewer, and a consumer, I'm a reviewer and a consumer, the best I can do is that if the manufacturer tells us it's safe, we just got to be on the lookout for laptops failing due to temperatures. That's about the only thing we can do. Please comment on 285H versus AMD 365HX. Well, I've tested the 370HX, or actually HX370. I haven't tested the 365HX. So that's to me, it's the top chip versus the top chip within the same market segment. So I think it's the most fair comparison comparing to the 370HX. I don't think there's a gaming laptop able to run Monster Hunter Wilds on high graphics without frame gen. Well, my RTX 4090 can easily run Monster Hunter Wilds, but that's a full dedicated GPU. We're talking about integrated GPUs. Yeah, I mean integrated GPUs are I think just going to struggle, except for maybe the Ryzen AI Max one. That was like they've got the huge integrated GPU. That one might be able to run it fairly well. Okay. Let's move into our first test. We're looking at Speedometer for our first test. Adelita says, I don't think the 365HX and 370HX will have a lot of difference. Yeah, they're going to be pretty similar chips. The 365 and 370, I think the 370 is just slightly bend higher and can go a little bit faster. But it's going to be very similar performance between those two. Okay. So first test is going to be Speedometer. Speedometer is a browser benchmarking test to basically give you what your CPU performance is like within a browser scenario when you need to, open a bunch of web browsers and you have a bunch of tabs open and you're trying to move between them quickly and load web pages. How responsive is the browser? Okay, that's kind of the goal here. We're going to go ahead and start the test. And for reference, I'll show you the results versus the 185H and the HX370 as well here after this is done. So we got 37. Let's run it one more time. We just got to refresh it, I believe. Let's just go here and then go here. What's up, Archer? Welcome to the stream. The Blade 16 is coming with 365 instead of 370 this year, except the 5090 version. Interesting. Yeah, I don't think there'll be a huge difference. So we got 35 that time. For the fun of it, let's run it one more time. And of course, this is going to get a little bit slower as the CPU settles down. If it's ramping very high. 36.7. Okay, so our third run, we'll count that one. We'll go to our benchmark, and we're going to compare this versus the old one. Speedometer, the old one, I know, I didn't put it in here, but AMD won by about 10%, but they were in the 20s. It was like 27 or 28 versus this one's 36. I can just pull up the exact number here. Here's the old test. Here, okay, so we're gonna, I'm gonna find the exact number here on the old video. Speedometer test. Okay, gotta go to the right section. Okay, so Core Ultra 185 got 25.5, and the AMD Ryzen AI 9 HX got 28. So we're looking at a huge win for the 285H for our first test. Let's go to here. It was 25.5 versus 28.1. 25.5 versus 28.1. So that's a huge improvement for Intel this time. 36.7. All right, moving on to Geekbench 6.3. So I think it's an interesting result for our opening result. That's actually a huge gap. which is pretty surprising that there's such a big gap there. We're going to go ahead and I also want to show you the Lenovo software and show you that we're in the highest performance mode, and I just confirm that we're in the highest performance mode. Geek performance mode is what we're in. So let's go ahead and run the CPU benchmark for Geekbench. I believe we also, I'm going to go ahead and cancel it because I want to pull up HW info so we can have that open and see our sensor data, how active the cores are, and what our wattage pull is. So here we go. All right. Beautiful. All right, let's go ahead and run CPU benchmark. So I want a disclaimer, right? Geekbench, in my opinion, is not a great test. I do it because a lot of other reviewers do it so you can have comparable data. I do not like Geekbench, primarily because as you can see right now, the CPU is only being slammed with 21 watts of performance. You know, that's very, very low. Very, very low power draw, only 12 watts, 8 watts. How? How is it, I don't know. I mean, you can see this PDF renderer, you know, maybe it's only using a single thread. Right now, some of these tests are using a single thread to do this. That's my guess because you can see the performance, one P core is at 5 gigahertz. So we're probably doing some single thread testing right now. But either way, it just rarely maxes the CPU. And so it just doesn't, maybe it's fair to a more of a realistic test, but it doesn't really give you a solid synthetic test to really maximize the silicon inside the laptop. I don't know. Either way, I'm going to do the results and we can compare the results so that you have them. But whenever I test Geekbench, I always got to mention that I just don't think it's a great test. Just Ordinary Guy says, why AMD never competes NVIDIA in making dedicated GPU in laptops? So that's an interesting question, and I would say that they kind of are this year competing with NVIDIA on the medium and low end in laptops with the new Ryzen AI Max, because the Max one with the giant integrated GPU is insanely powerful. It's like an RTX 4070 in an integrated GPU or something similar, maybe a 4060, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, so I mean, I would say that's their most competitive laptop GPU currently. It's just a lot of people didn't realize, I guess, that it's so powerful that it can actually be a dedicated GPU, essentially. Okay. Beta says, the RTX 50 series not looking good. Arrow Lake CPU is also not looking good. This gen is looking more and more like a skip. Well, I think, I don't know what the Arrow Lake HX lineup is looking like. I'm going to reserve judgment until I see the results, right? I'm going to try to make all my comments based on the actual results that we get from the tests that we do, rather than just, you know, giving my opinion before it's an informed opinion, you know? So I'm really trying to focus on the results-based comments. Geekbench is only good for phones. Yeah, maybe. Are you going to review the 2025 Zephyrus G16? I saw you check them out at the CES. I'm planning to get one. That's my hope. Asus said that they were going to send me basically their whole lineup this year for review. I hope they do. We are about to eat more AI. Yeah. I think AI will be integrated into more applications, but there's just not that many use cases right now for ordinary users to have AI on their laptop. So that's interesting. It's interesting that they're pushing so much AI stuff inside of the laptop space, and yet almost no users are using AI in day-to-day, even though they're making it like, buy the latest AI PC. But it really doesn't make that big of a difference yet, unless you have a very specific use case where you want to use AI, like rendering images locally on your computer with an image generation engine that you're housing locally or something, or there's other AI things that you can do, like webcam background replacement, Word document or Office document type help, generating corrections and stuff like that with AI and word processors, stuff like that. It's gonna be helpful, right, over the long haul, but it's still being integrated into real life applications. And so it's important not to get lost in all of that. Okay, so we got 2875, 17,513. Let us compare old versus new. Okay, so our result, CPU was, I gotta type in the right computer, keyboard, 2875 slash 17,513. All right. And the old result was AMD won by 20% and 7%. Let's actually just go take a look at the results real quick on Geekbench. Okay, so it's basically a tie. Am I in the right browser right now? Window? Okay, so we're looking at before the 185H was 2489. So going back to our score here, we're looking at 2875. All right, and the previous generation scored 400 or so points less. So that's a big improvement, about 20% improvement, 17%, 18% improvement in single core, and almost exactly matching the AMD Ryzen AI9 HX370, 2896, so about 21 points less. So, I mean, that's essentially a tie, but AMD by 1%. And then in terms of multi-core score, we're looking at 15,472 for AMD and 14,400 for the 185H. And the new version has a much higher score, beating both at 17,513. So, all right, so that's another win for the 285H. Let's go ahead and just put these. I want to put these results in, but I'm mainly going to put in the AMD score here, or I don't know. I'm going to put, what should I put? It's hard to put it all. AMD 2896 slash 15,472. Okay, so we are making big strides. I'll put the both in here. I want to make sure we just include everything, I guess. Intel, I should have done the first time, 2489 slash 14,454. Okay, nice. Okay, so that's another win for the new GPU or the new CPU. Technically, AMD won the single core, but it's close enough that it's like a tie because it's within a 1% margin of error. I got to type that correctly. There we go. Time to run the GPU benchmark next. So running the GPU benchmark on the laptop now. And it's impressive so far, okay? That's a good start for the 285H. I was not expecting it to actually beat AMD in multi-core. And so that's a big step up for Intel. Brandon Sargent with the $20 donation. Thanks for the great content as usual. Excited for the new Blade 16 5090. Pre-ordered. Excited for the thinner chassis OLED and better keyboard. Are you allowed to disclose what embargo dates look like for the 50 series? So thank you so much for the super chat. Really does mean a lot. I appreciate your support and all that. I really appreciate that. So embargo dates, I don't think I'm technically supposed to tell you, but the previous embargo dates were supposed to be mid-March, but I think it was delayed a lot by like 5 weeks or something like that. So it should be end of March, maybe for the embargo dates, or maybe the ship dates got delayed. I haven't got the technical stuff. I actually don't have any laptops yet for the 5000 series on the way yet. And when they send it, that's when I'll really know what the dates are. But it should either be the very end of March or early April, around that time frame, before I'm able to make videos on the new 5000 series. But I'm really excited. Okay, so we got 43,200 and 13. Let's put that into the comparison chart here. All right, so we are looking at, here, I can just scoot me over a little bit so you can still see me while we type these in. All right. We're looking at, wow, okay. Very interesting, 43,213. All right, so Intel before had 27,000, and now it gets 43,000. All right, and the AMD got 42.7 in the previous generation, and now gets is beaten by the new Intel 43,213. So another win for the 285H. Very impressive. All right, moving on to Handbrake render test. Let's go ahead and do it. Pulling up Handbrake. All right. Beautiful. Render test. We're going to pull the file in. Now we're going to do 2 tests today. First one, we're going to be doing raw processing, just straight up trying to power through a video render file. And this one is going to not utilize the special Intel QuickSync media encoder. This is going to be using the multi-core rendering capabilities, and it's gonna not be as fast. The Intel QuickSync media encoder is much faster. All right, the previous, while this is running, we can see down below, we're estimating a time remaining of 5 minutes, 15 seconds. Let's just pop over to the previous results for this. Interesting. Maybe I'm not doing the test exactly the same. I want to make sure that we're doing the test exactly the same. All right, let's go to the Handbrake render test. Maybe I rendered it 2 different ways. Because that is going to take, I think it took like 7 minutes last time. So right now I'm looking through previous, okay, so we just did 1080p for our test last time. Okay, for the raw render test, because it took too long, so I switched it to 1080p, that's right. Okay, so it's fast 1080p 30. Fast 1080p 30. Let's start encoding that. Well, let's stop for a moment. Let the CPU cool down for about at least a little while here. Make sure the CPU is below 50 degrees at least. Right now we're at 60, 55, 51, 61. All right. All right, 48 now. All right, let's go ahead and start. We'll overwrite it. Okay, so here is the window now. Let's go ahead and zoom in. We can take a look at the estimated time, get an idea. Estimated time, 1 minute, 45 seconds. And if we look at our results, Intel previously did this in 2 minutes, 22 seconds, and AMD did this in 2 minutes, 8 seconds. So if the estimated time is correct, this might beat AMD by just a little bit. Let's find out. All right. Let's take a look at our HW info stats. Over here, we are hitting 104 degrees right now. Peaked at 107 over here. Our package power draw right now is 82 watts, but we peaked at 121. So we're cranking the watts through the system right now at extremely high performance, really taking advantage of all the cores and threads. and maximizing out the possible performance of this laptop's CPU, or yeah, basically maxing it out. Now, when we're at the 80-watt power limit, you can see our temperatures are no longer maxing. Well, actually, our core package is still at 102. Still over 100 right now. Even though we're doing 80 watts of power. Now, they're coming down a little bit. I mean, it was 105, right? Estimated time remaining 30 seconds. Let's see. Let's see what we get, all right? Ooh, it slowed down a little bit. I wonder if me moving around HW info window slowed us down a little. I feel like I might need to reset it. Gotta just let it sit, probably, for a fair test. But let's go ahead and see what the final result is here. And then we'll do it one more time just to verify the results. 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Let's start it one more time. Hold on. We gotta let the CPU breathe a moment, and then we'll try it one more time. All right, let the CPU breathe. Get it down below 50 degrees again, and then we'll go one more time. Just to verify our results. How are the thermals looking versus their 370? Both of this, the Ryzen and the Intel chip, both of them run really, really hot. So just know that they both are going to go over 90 degrees. Both are going to reach thermal throttling. And really, that's primarily determined by the manufacturer. Because if you're not hitting maximum thermal temperatures, then that just means that you are not running the CPU at the highest wattage power pull that you possibly can. Because basically every laptop in the market, everywhere, all the time, will hit maximum temperature. If you just run it at maximum performance, it'll boost up there and the temperatures will spike. That's just how CPUs work. The main thing really is what kind of performance can you get at a certain wattage level. And that's the thing that matters the most. At 45 watts, at 80 watts, at 100 watts, what kind of performance do you get, and what kind of temperatures are you looking at in a sustained manner, you know? So, okay, so we're not moving the window, we're not looking around, but we are still pulling 80 watts, because I just want to make sure I do the test exactly the same. Looks like it'll be about the same amount of time to complete the test. Seth Trick says, check HW info, check the effective clock in HW info to understand how the processor really works in tests. The effective clock is the frequency taking into account idle states. I got to scoot the HW info a little bit over because I think you're talking about right here. But the thing is, that's going to be partially factoring in, you know, averages, you know? So I don't know. I think it's more important to look at just your overall clock threads and looking at what your P cores are doing, what your E cores are doing, what your temperature is like, what the wattage pull is. To me, that's the most effective way to measure the CPU's performance. Looks like it's going to be around 2 minutes, 14 seconds again. Here we go. Two minutes, 12 seconds, 13, 14. So 2:14 verified twice. All right, verified twice. We're looking at 2:14. And so we're beating the 185H by 8 seconds and slightly behind the Ryzen by about 6 seconds. All right, let's go to the QSV and see how we do with a 4K QSV file. Render, okay, so we'll go ahead and start this. We're under 50 degrees on the CPU, so we'll go ahead and start her up. There we go. Starting the test. You can see, if I angle the camera a little bit, Just gonna scoot this over a little. There we go. If you want to see the core effective clocks, interesting. Yeah, the core effective clocks are super low when you are running the media encoder, because we're basically running this through not the main cores, but the secondary media encoder, which I believe is part of the integrated graphics solution. But wow, it's fast. Holy smokes. We're almost done, and it's 48, 49 seconds. Intel QSV is so good and so fast. So improvements on the old one by only a couple of seconds. All right, so that 4K render file went 4 seconds faster, which is about an 8% improvement, and we're still beating the AMD, which was 1 minute and 10 seconds. And I think this is the most realistic media encoder comparison, more realistic than the raw, because most video editors are going to be using the media encoder to do the files because it's much, much faster. So now we have Divinci Resolve to test. Though, let's see here. I got to double check the settings that we're doing for this one. Divinci Resolve. I believe we're doing the same file that we were before. Yes, we are. Okay, and this one we're doing AV1 MP4. Close Handbrake. So Divinci Resolve. The interesting thing about Divinci Resolve is that they do leverage all of the different media encoders pretty much. So that's really nice. Change the frame rate to match, correct. All right, so it's importing the video file right now. There it is. All right, and now we're gonna make sure we get the set correctly. We're gonna use AV1 timeline resolution. We also need to edit that. Let's make sure it is this correct amount. It should be a 4K. 4K timeline resolution and 29 frames per second. Good. We're doing MP4, AV1, Intel as our render resolution type. If you have an NVIDIA card, you can switch this to NVIDIA as another option. And we'll go ahead and add this to queue. Good. I believe we are good to go. Let me make sure this is set to render just on the video file itself. It is. We're good. Okay. Let's go ahead and check the previous results. Previous results for Intel was 1 minute 33 seconds and AMD was 1 minute 12 seconds. So let's start this again. Here we go. Render all. So the time to beat would be 1 minute 12 seconds from AMD. Right now it's estimating 1 minute 14 seconds left. So I don't think we're gonna beat it, but looks like we'll maybe have a slight improvement on speed. We'll see. Nipu says, got this video recommended to me, liked, commented, thank you. Love from India. Appreciate that. Aditya says, that was fast. Yeah, the encoders really help boost the speed. If you were to render that same file raw, it would take about 7-8 minutes probably. But doing the Intel QSV 4K it's done in 49 seconds. So you're talking about like 7 times speed improvement using the media encoder. I believe this tells you how much time it took to do the render here at the end. Let's see. Completed in 1 minute, 19 seconds. So we're looking at only a small improvement, and AMD is still in the lead for the Divinci Resolve render, but not by much. 9-second difference, or 7-second difference. And Intel managed to shave off 14 seconds. That's impressive. That is actually a really big gen-on-gen improvement in terms of performance, but AMD still in the lead by just a little bit. All right, Cinebench R23. Let's check it out. So Cinebench R23 is, actually I think we're doing R20 first, is a synthetic render test. And the R20, 23, and 24, we're going to do each of those. I believe we're going to do it 5 times in a row and then get our final score on the 5th one as our de facto score. Though the technical way to do it, a lot of people would would be to do it for a continuous loop for 10 minutes, which is you can't do that in Cinebench R20, but let me see what I do to make sure that it's fair. But it looks like I run it several times and then we record the score. Yeah, okay, so 5 times I think is about right. Go ahead and run this. And keep in mind, I do keep HW info. You could get slightly better scores if you were to turn off HW info. And I'm gonna need to move my window to maybe over here. Yeah, that's fine, okay. You could get slightly better scores if you turn off HW info 64. It takes a little bit of the CPU juice away, monitoring all of this data. You can see we're slamming the CPU. We're doing over 100 watts or 100 degrees again. Wattage right now at 76 watts. Let's see what we get for our first run score. 7,970, so basically 8,000 or very close to 8,000. See what we get on run 2. Should go down just a little bit. Each run will likely go down a little bit until the third, fourth, 5th run will probably be close to the same. Basically, you're looking at turbo boost, boosting the clock initially, and then you run into thermal limits and power limits, and the clock comes down a little bit, and the speed is reduced as well. All right, 7,832, run it again right away. Checking the previous gen score, Cinebench R20 did 7,700, AMD did 9,100. So we're looking at a pretty clear lead for AMD, I believe, in at least when you're comparing the 370 HX, not sure about the 365, but the 370, I believe, in Cinebench will be slightly ahead in all 3 of these runs. Which makes sense. It's pretty similar test each time. 7949. So surprisingly, we're getting very similar results. 105 degrees. Wow. 107 watts of power. Even now. Later on, I'm surprised it's able to boost so high, like with only like a few seconds. A few seconds off, it's able to reboost all the way up to over 100 watts of power, which is impressive. Because a lot of machines, when they thermal throttle, they end up coming significantly down, you know? So, all right, 7659. We'll let this run, and this will be our final run for the Cinebench R20. Then we'll move to R23. And we'll do the same thing. And we'll see what we get. I'm going to pre-order the MSI Vector 5080 Core Ultra 7 for $2,200. It's a good option? Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty good option. Though that's actually a really good price. Impressive. What model of laptop is this on? This is the Ideapad Pro 5i. All right, so 7654 is what we're going to put down for our score, but we're bouncing between 8K or like 7970 or whatever, and this score, let's see. So it's like the same. It's like this, very similar. 76, 58. So not much improvement in Cinebench for Intel, which is interesting. I think it's very interesting. Cinebench R23. Let's see if we have the same results. R23 on the 185H was 20,000. Let's go multi-core. Starting now. You can see the boost clock right here on the P cores. We're looking at 4.3, 4.7, 4.5 gigahertz, super high boost clocks. Initially, the E cores are even at over 4 gigahertz. Very impressive. Lots of high temperatures, though. That's going to reduce our wattage. We were boosting over 100 watts. Now we're doing 81 watts. Again, we're looking at temps over 100 degrees nowadays on these machines, and as far as we can tell, it's normal. 20,971 for our first run. It was 20,971, so almost 21,000, which is not a huge performance gain. 20,000 from Intel, 20,004 for the 185H for the previous generation, 22,700 for the AMD. So 21,000 splits the difference almost between them. Let's see what we get as we continue to do multiple runs. Obviously we're not going to take the first run, but it's good to have that as a data point. Like, this is the best case scenario in a quick one-off. So 20,787, not a huge difference again. Very similar levels of performance. Well, am I going to review the Zephyrus models? Currently plans, yes. Waiting for Asus to send me the new Zephyrus G16. Refreshing chat. For some reason it went blank. 20,014. So almost the same score right there as the previous generation 185H. Very interesting. Again, 100, we are boosting again. Just with a tiny little break, it's able to boost to a little bit higher wattage. Down to 66 watts now. Interesting. So the long power on this laptop, we're not really boosting massively, continuously. Like, I was expecting to be more like 80 watts the whole time we're doing this, but apparently not. 19,675. Interesting. And this could be laptop cooler specific with varying performance levels. 114 watts there, and now down to 67 watts, 65 watts. So the first 5 runs initially had more performance in the first 3-4 runs. Now on the 5th run, we're dropping performance lower due to our wattage pull here being less. And that's very interesting. Seth Trick, yes, thank you for the tip. I believe I normally look at the effective clock normally. I just didn't have that pulled up. But thank you. 19,620. Very, I mean, it's obviously a great performance, but interestingly less than the 185 in this scenario. I'm pretty sure that is just because of the wattage pull. Like the Zephyrus G16, which is the chassis we were testing the 185H in, pretty sure that was pulling over 80 watts the whole time. So we're getting 10 watts less right now going through the CPU. That's going to impact performance. So interesting that we're actually getting slightly less now. All right, last run, we'll go and record this score. 19,686. Interesting. Very interesting. So, like I said, I would attribute that to 686. I would attribute that to a difference in chassis, and likely, if you get the Core Ultra 9 285H in the same Zephyrus G16 chassis, it would perform just a little better than this laptop, probably. Though it's hard to say that for sure unless you actually did the tests. Cinebench R24 is next. And for Cinebench, we're primarily focusing just on multi-core. We're not doing single core thread testing. Though I'm pretty sure the Intel 285H probably would have slight performance gains in the single core department. So yeah, let's go ahead and do the multi-core now. Starting the multi-core for Cinebench R24. Oh, we got 10-minute tests. We're going to do it to standard test, I believe. Let me see what we did. I don't think we did a 10-minute test last time. No. Okay. So we're going to turn off 10-minute test and start. Okay. So here we are. We're at the start of the test. It's ramping up. Package power is 105 watts, 105 degrees, 110 watts. Look at the core effective clocks. It's very, very good performance, very, very high temps, and lots of power throughput going through the chassis. I am going to go ahead and raise the back up. I usually raise the back just a little bit. Might help the temps, just a hair. But yeah. 85 watts, 104 degrees. This is obviously good performance. I'm curious to see if we're going to beat the 185H that I tested recently in the R24. We're just, we're doing this objectively. So previous generation got 1120. Let's see. Let me see. Did I put it in here? Cinebench R24. 1120. AMD got 1242. Let's see what we get for the 285H. When is the 5000 series coming? Should be, I believe, shipping mid-April now. I believe. Maybe some of the units will ship a little sooner, but I believe it's April 19th is when they're actually going to ship now, if I recall correctly. The previous plan, I believe, was more around March 12th or March 15th, and now they're shipping, I think, 5 weeks later to mid-April. I believe the dates are up in the air. Nothing's official yet, because they may have to delay further, or maybe they'll be able to ship it a little sooner. But I think they wanted to make sure the laptops don't have any missing ROPs, and they also wanted to make sure that the laptops are, the drivers are maybe a little bit more mature, so less bugs. I'm guessing those are the two main reasons, because the desktop GPUs, the big controversy with the missing ROPs. I don't know if you're following that, but basically the ROPs are one of the primary computational parts of a GPU, and if you're missing one of those, it can impact performance significantly. Gamers Nexus found it to be like 8 to 10% performance difference when you're missing one of those key computational units. So they want to make sure that that's not happening with laptops, is my understanding. So that's why. That's why the delay happened. As far as I can tell, they're just doing more quality control. That's my understanding. But nothing official. Like, that's all just kind of not hearsay, but you're probably almost never going to see NVIDIA publicly admit, that we want to do more quality control. We want to make sure nothing's missing. But they're going to be doing that in the background because they don't want another controversy right now. Ace says, I'm ordering the Acer Predator Helios 16, which has the i9-14900HX and a 4080 for $2,200 USD. Yeah, that should be a good laptop. Seth Trick says, low score on the R23 is strange. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, we have performance gains in the web browsing and in Geekbench, but Cinebench R23, R24, and R20, not seeing the same performance gain. It might be related to how, we're slamming the CPU super hard. And it's very important to keep in mind that the computer that we're comparing this one to is pretty similar, Zephyrus G16 has a pretty similar chassis size to this one. But the actual thermal throughput of the two devices is slightly different, and I think the G16 with a vapor chamber likely has slightly better thermal headroom than this one, because I think we're able to sustain over 80 watts. This one dropping down to 65 watts. Okay, so we got 1146. And Cinebench R24 is a long form test, so we're just going to run it once. Takes a lot longer than the other ones. And the previous generation, let's see what we got. 1120. So we're looking at a slight improvement in Cinebench R24. Not much, only 26 points increase. And the Ryzen is still ahead in R24. So let's put the results in here. 1146. I think most likely we're looking at the performance gain here in R24 because we're only running it one time rather than running it continuously. If you were to run it continuously for longer, you probably would see slightly more performance on the 185H due to more thermal headroom on the Zephyrus G16. All right, let's go ahead and run. We're moving into Ada64. So this is a benchmarking and testing utility called Ada64, if you're not familiar. It's one way you can benchmark and test your computer. We're going to be doing the RAM test and see what the results are. So you can see we've got Intel Core Ultra 9, 285H. This should be interesting. This says LPDDR 6485, but I believe this is supposed to be like 8500 mega transfer RAM. So that's interesting. I don't know what's going on with that, because you would expect it to be listed on here correctly, but maybe it is, or maybe it's not. I don't know. That's interesting though, because I thought it was faster. Yeah, so jumping over here to the product page, it says LPD DDR5X 8533 mega transfers right here on the page. So I don't know what's going on with this. Could be just a misread. Maybe it needs to be multiplied by some other number to get it to be exactly correct, like this. I don't know. But right here is not listed correctly according to the spec page on Lenovo. I just like to point things out to be as informative as possible. Let's zoom in here. What are we looking at for the Ada64 numbers? 84,742 for the read, 82,000 for the write, 105 gigabits per second for the copy, 126 nanoseconds for the latency. And then we have the L0, L1, L2, L3 caches. I can pull up the previous tests, but the most important ones, I think, are the read and write and the latency. Memory allocation timeout. Interesting. So we had a little error at the end. I don't think that's going to affect our results, but let's take a look at our RAM speed test. All right, so compared to the 185H, we're looking at 85,000 read, 72,000 write, copy 91, 134. So it's pretty similar overall speeds with a little bit faster copy and faster write, a little bit faster latency. And the Ryzen had faster read but slower write and copy, a little better latency. The L1, L2 caches certainly looks to be a lot better on the 285H with the L0, the L1 cache. Wait. They changed the 8064, so now there's an L0 cache. That's interesting. Yeah, so it's hard to compare this exactly apples to apples, but you can see the results there. The read, write, and copy, they're all in the same ballpark. They're probably not going to make a noticeable difference in almost anything, even the most memory-intensive type of tasks, quite frankly. So overall, good memory speeds. Nothing to really say like, oh, this is going to change whether I buy the laptop or not. But let me see here. What did we put on our memory speed results? 88K versus 97K. So the read, what was our result? Let me go back to the live stream. 84.7. So basically 85K if we were rounding, but let's see here. Yeah, so 85K. So reviewing the synthetic test results so far, internet browser, the 285H wins. The Geekbench, we had significant improvements in single and multi-core scores. Pull these apart a little bit more so you can see them a little better. And then Handbrake, we saw some improvements, shaved off 8 seconds off of the Intel render time. Not quite as fast as the Ryzen for Handbrake. The media encoder using QSV with Intel shaved off 4 seconds of time, which is really good. And Intel is still the king in terms of media encoder speeds, which is important to keep in mind. I think that's an important thing that a lot of video editors in particular will care about. But that's only in Handbrake. In Divinci Resolve, we saw Intel shave off 14 seconds, but not quite catching up to the Ryzen chip. Cinebench R23, we have AMD pulling ahead in all 3 of the tests. And interestingly enough, the 185H slightly outperforming the 285H in Cinebench. And I believe that's because of the different laptop chassis having a higher power throughput in the previous generation, and there just not being much of a performance gap in terms of Cinebench type raw render, multi-core render speeds. Memory speed, slightly slower for the write, but the read and copy, or the read, sorry, slightly slower for the read, but faster for the write and copy. It's time to move into the gaming, because the gaming is really where I think we're going to see the biggest gains for the Intel Core Ultra 9 285H. So the first game up is Baldur's Gate 3, then Counter-Strike, Cyberpunk 2077, God of War, and Witcher 3 will be the next 5 games. And you can see the AMD performance in those games was significantly better. Baldur's Gate 3, for example, Intel did 38 with a low of 1% for 13, and the Ryzen did 4935, which is very good for a smooth, good overall gaming experience. So moving into the gaming benchmark segment now, I think this is where we're going to see our biggest performance gains overall. So Baldur's Gate 3, let's fire it up and see what we get. We're going to try to test this exactly the same as I did last time. Now, I have reduced the I've reduced the default resolution in Windows to just be QHD plus, so 2560 by 1600. I think it's important for you to know that I've changed the resolution to match exactly the Zephyrus G16 resolution. I actually can't tell that I changed it, which is interesting, because OLED does a really good job when you change off of the native resolution. It still looks really good. Okay, so this is going to be all low settings. 2560, no VSync. Let me make sure that FSR is the same setting. Should be. FSR. So you can see, I'm trying to get the settings here pulled up. So FSR is set to balanced. FSR 2.2 set to balanced. So inside of here, we're doing the low preset here, FSR set to balanced. So everything is exactly the same as it was in the previous test. Go ahead and load in now. All right. So let's see how the new Intel Arc 140T does with Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, so keep in mind, last generation performance. Let's review performance. One more time going into this. Intel had an average of 38 with a 1% low of 13, which is not great for playability. 13 FPS is not great. Okay, so we're starting the test. Right now we're doing 48 and 13, which is so much better than it was. And the gameplay looks very smooth as well. You can see the frame time graph. We're getting an occasional blip here and there. Just gonna click end turn, and then it jumps around. Getting occasional little blips as you change characters. That's very normal in Baldur's Gate. And we're gonna end turn, and we're doing 45, 33 right now. If you have your 1% low over 30, it's a huge difference compared to having a 1% low of like 13. 13 ends up being a lot of slideshow-ish type of behavior, and it can be very jarring. Versus 4533, that's good. That is really good. Very smooth, continuous gameplay. I am going to make this a little bit bigger and center it for ease of camera angle. But let's see here. So we did 40. What was the result at the end there? I want to make sure I get it exactly right. $45.33, I believe, was the result. But I'm playing it back. Yeah, 45.33. Okay. So very impressive performance improvement, like huge. CPU benchmark, Baldur's Gate. 45.33 or 1% low. So that means that AMD with the Ryzen chip slightly ahead. Just slightly, by a little bit. It'd be hard to tell a visual difference between 49 and 45 and 33 and 35, but it is there. So let's go ahead and move on to Counter-Strike 2. I still think that's a huge gain, right? Intel Baldur's Gate 3 did 38 before, 38 to 45, 7 FPS performance improvements. So yeah, that's about 20%. But the thing is, 1% stutters, improving those is really what needed to happen. More than anything, like the average FPS was pretty good before. 38 is still pretty good enough to play. But if the 1% low is only 13, it's not really playable. Not perfectly playable, not a great experience. But if you can have the 1% low be over 30, suddenly it feels smooth. It looks good. Like everything. You're gonna feel less jarred by the graphical, the graphics. You'll walk away like, you know, with a 1% low of only 13. You're probably gonna feel a little bit nauseated, a little bit in a sense, because the screen will be jumping. It'll be a stutter, and you know it's a little bit jarring to the gaming experience. So 1% lows over 30. That's really what you want to have a great time in a video game. All right. So here we go. 2560 by 1600. I need to make sure the settings are correct again. All right. What did I do on the actual settings? So one, Counter-Strike, I did 80, Intel 80, AMD. So this is going to be hard to get exactly correct. So we're going to start QHD Plus. I did 2 versions of this before, but I'm just going to play on low preset, I think. We're just going to click low preset, and it should still be the same, but I'll just do a quick current preset low, okay? That means FSR right now is on balanced, okay? All the settings are on low, FSR is on balanced. Let's hop into a game. We're going to show FPS here on the left, and okay. All right, so you can see, actually I'm gonna try to spectate. So you can see right now, the FPS is in the 90s, over 100 right now. That is so impressive, because the previous version, I mean, the previous version did pretty good, but it was clearly like in the 70s, in the, not as high as what it is right now. 90, 80, 90. Like, look, trying to just get a rough average is what the goal is. And if we can get an idea, like over 100 right now, so it's going to depend on what area of the map you're in. But before it was bouncing, I'm gonna look at the range in the different areas. Like 80 here in mid. Versus now about 90 to 100 in mid. Yeah. This is, it's hard, since there's no technical frame rate capture for Counter-Strike 2, I just kind of have to average it around. But basically, lows here are about 70, highs are going to be around 100 to 110. So let's go ahead and have me hop in, and I'll try to actually kill some people for a moment. All right. Like, the gameplay feels very smooth, very responsive. This guy, no. I was shooting someone else, man. All right. Oh, got me with the deagle. Oh boy. This is bad. Pump shotty. All right, let's do the Tech 9. Oh, he was invincible when I actually landed the headshot. Okay, so that's the end. Like right now we're doing, like, the averages that I'm looking at are very similar to the averages that was with the Ryzen. The Ryzen was jumping between 90 to a little over 100. So it seems, as far as I can tell, it seems very on par with the Ryzen AI 9, with the Radeon GPU. So it's a little bit subjective in terms of actually giving this an official number, but I'm thinking that we mark it as 95. I feel like that's the most fair. We're doing 105. So it really depends on. I'm gonna kill a couple more people. I'm gonna kill a couple more people. I really like Counter-Strike. And I mean, it feels good. Like, that's the thing. Like, this feels like a premium gaming experience. Maybe the detail is not quite, maximum, because we're not running everything on like ultra high levels of quality with FSR on quality or like native resolution rendering. But the thing is, this GPU is going to be used in lots of handheld gaming laptops, and budget people are not going to be looking for like the most premium type of experience. They just want a good experience, and this is a good gaming experience. Like, it doesn't feel like it's a massive difference between this and playing on a high-end laptop. This is doable, and you don't feel like you're at a huge disadvantage. So overall, I mean, I'm really impressed. Like, running around here, I'm at 120 FPS right now. So 110, 105. Maybe I underestimated the amount of FPS that we're getting, because we're getting consistently over 100 right now. And this, I'm like trying to look at it pretty regularly here. 90s. Okay, 105 again. I mean, That's impressive. It's just such a big difference compared to last year, which we're only getting about 80, you know? I mean, 80 still felt good. Like, it felt playable before, but it's definitely an improvement. So let's move on to the next one. I'm tempted to move it to 100 because it just felt like the whole time that we were over 100 running around. But just know that Counter-Strike, it's not the most objective because we don't have a technical counter in that game yet, at least as far as I know. There probably is some way to benchmark it. But moving into Cyberpunk 2077, that does have a benchmarking tool so we can actually compare numbers technically exactly correctly. Okay, so this one, Cyberpunk 2077, is a game where we had a big improvement for, or a big win for AMD, 37 FPS versus 64 FPS. So let's see what we get playing with the exact same settings again, doing the benchmark. So this is going to be QHD plus, low, FSR 3 on balanced. All right. Can you undervolt this CPU? No, I don't believe that you can. I believe we're looking at maybe load line calibration might be the only way to undervolt it, but that's not going to be offered by very many people. It'd be a very niche thing in certain laptops, you know, that are designed to be high performance laptops for like XMG maybe will do load line calibration or something like that. But the vast majority of people will not. I don't even think Lenovo would offer it. So it'd be very, very niche. Okay, so 2560 by 1600. I want it to be full screen. All right, graphics, balanced. We can turn on frame gen. I don't think, because we can do FSR 3 frame gen in this game natively, but I don't think we enabled it in the last test. So let me see. I need to hear myself. Balance, right? Okay, I think we're ready to go. Here we go. We're going to run the benchmark. Oh, we did have it on. Okay, so we're turning frame gen on. All right. Let's go ahead and restart the game. We shouldn't have to restart the game, but it said we had to. I think it's probably wrong, but let's hop back into it anyway, because I want the test to be right? Okay. I should probably also make sure we set everything to low. Should have already been set to low, but I should double check. In 3, 2, 1. All right. Showing. Do. All right, settings, video, graphics. Do. Low. Technically, we could be doing XE sampling now without frame gen. I guess we need FSR 3 for frame gen to be enabled. All right, so we got the low video settings, frame gen, balanced, FSR 3 right now. I would anticipate we're going to get XeSS frame gen soon, but it's not actually officially in Cyberpunk 2077 yet. So just something to keep in mind that you're going to be able to use FSR 3 and frame gen from FSR 3 with the Intel Arc 140T in the games that are supported. So, you know, things like Cyberpunk 2077, Starfield, and quite a few other ones will be able to utilize the frame gen from FSR3. And coming up, we'll have FSR4. There's going to be, and then of course, any other games that you want to incorporate frame gen into, you can use something like the limitless scaling tool to incorporate frame gen, even into Intel XeSS for legacy titles where you can get high FPS and then boost your FPS to be really, really high. So that is a possibility. Okay, so low settings, FSR3 frame gen is enabled, balanced. We've had to reset the game twice to make sure the settings are correct. We should be good now. Let's go ahead and run it. So there was a comment that led me to discover the limitless tool, limitless scaling, and it's a thing I'm going to probably make a whole video on coming up. Okay, so right now 4845 is our frame rate and 1% low, which is excellent. Now the thing is, with frame gen being enabled, you really want to be getting more FPS, and frame gen's not really going to help that much when you have your base FPS so low, because there's going to be a lot of AI artifacts. So I probably would not enable frame gen in this scenario, but we're testing it to test it exactly how we tested it before. Because right now I'm just trying to make sure that the test is fair and balanced. Though technically FSR is an AMD technology, maybe it runs better than the Intel XeSS. So we'll try running this on the XeSS super sampling as well. See if that helps us more. So the previous, comparing this, so 49.2, okay? Going over to our previous test, the 185H got 37.2. The Ryzen got 64.04. Now, let's switch over to Intel XeSS, and we'll do balanced. Though technically, I probably, if I were actually trying to run this and play the game seriously, I would probably switch it to performance mode. Performance mode is probably the way to go for actual gameplay smoothness in a game like Cyberpunk 2077, because you're wanting to get the most frames per second in a first-person shooter that you can, while still maintaining good levels of detail, is the way I would think about it. All right, so this is without frame generation, and it does look actually, I think, better. Less artifacts, less visual glitches, and we're still getting a playable frame rate. Most importantly, our 1% low is excellent at 33, 32 right now. That's really what's going to make this game actually playable. Trying to look at the previous score. Yeah, so the Intel Arc previous generation, at least with frame gen, it still had a pretty decent 1% low, but it was not visually smooth enough to look good, because of the artifactual visual bugginess there. Right now, this 4033, very playable. Since there's no frame gen, it's going to be very responsive, have low latency, and all of that without any visual artifacts. So it's going to be overall a really good experience, I believe, at 4033. Interesting looking at our power watts. We're doing 52 watts through the CPU right there. Well, technically through the GPU and CPU combined, I believe. So 40.17 for the Intel Xe. If we go to performance mode, let's see what we get. You know what? Let's go to, since we didn't test this in the other one, I just want to show you a little gameplay. Let's take a look at some gameplay in performance mode. And I'll tell you how smooth it feels. And we can also look at 1% lows in actual game world, which is a little different than the benchmarking. Because benchmarking is like, a technical, like little area, it's not the whole it's not the whole thing. Let's see here. I need to go about here, I believe. This is like right in the middle of, right before a big combat sequence. So we can get like an average FPS in the middle of combat. Load's fast, very fast load. Okay, so I just reset the FPS average, 47. This is without any frame gen. Right, that's the main thing I want to keep in mind. 47, 42, no frame gen. The gameplay feels good. It's obviously not the smoothest gameplay in the world at 47 FPS, but it's playable. That's the most important thing. It feels good to play. And I'll be able to actually aim consistently. Like, it's not going to be as good aim as, 120 FPS, but it still feels like I have decent control, and the smoothness, you can see the frame time graph is just super consistent. I don't know why I can't hit that guy. All right, so what is this? This guy faking his death. All right, last guy. Finish him. There we go. 45, 40. So 40 for a 1% low. I feel like that is really good, and the gameplay feels good enough to actually enjoy playing Cyberpunk 2077. All right. Let's go back to our test. So when comparing to Cyberpunk 2077, 37 was our previous and our test. And at the exact same settings, let's see what we got. Because that's the important thing, is that we're testing with the exact same settings. $49.2. So how does that shake down? So 49. So from 37 to 49, that's a 12 FPS increase, which is going to be a big performance improvement. Let's see. 12 over 37. A 32% performance increase in Cyberpunk 2077 as benchmarked. Let's go to God of War and check out the performance improvement there. Very nice. I'd invite you guys to like the live stream, subscribe if you want to get more tech reviews in the future. I've got RTX 5000 series laptops coming soon, and I'm excited. I'm excited to check them out, test out all the latest tech, and see how much performance gain we actually get in the 5000 series. Even though it may not be looking that good, except for maybe the 5090. 5090 should have some noticeable gains. 5080 will still be better than the 4080, but not by a huge margin. And probably most importantly, the biggest thing with the 5000 series is testing out multi-frame generation and seeing how well it actually works in games. So that's going to be very interesting. All right, so God of War is our next test. And let's see what our settings were for God of War. So graphics settings are on low, correct? Display is on FSR2 on performance. So FSR2 is on performance. Everything is set correctly. Very nice. Let's go ahead and hit continue. Previous generation, we got God of War was 2826, and AMD was 48. All right, so let's see what we get right now. 44, 42. So we're looking at big gains from 28 to 44. That's a 16 FPS improvement. Let's actually run the test though, because we want to do it in the exact same area and everything. Because I want everything to be correct. And I walked ahead a little bit in the map, and now the game keeps sending me, I have to like walk a little bit to go back to our testing area for the benchmark area, which is right here. Okay, we're doing 47, 42, 41. Okay, so God of War, if you've not played it, it's an amazing game. Highly recommend it. It's some of the best storytelling in video game history, I think. All right, so here's our benchmark area. Let's go ahead and run the technical benchmark right now. So I got to make sure that I want to make sure I'm looking at exactly the same way and testing it the exact same way. So I'm going to check how I did it before, but this is how I usually do my test. All right. 4339 is the official benchmark area. Let's check how I did my test to make sure it matches up. Okay, yeah, I did the run through. All right, so 4339 compared to 28, right? That's a huge difference. Performance gain through the roof, more than what they said it was in their press brief, which is refreshing because usually companies are claiming a lot more than they actually are, or they're claiming the peak performance gains typically. But here we're seeing actual more gaming performance gains than what they advertised. Okay, so God of War was 28 before, and so calculating that up, we are now 43, so that's 15 FPS gain. 15 FPS divided by 28, a 54% improvement in God of War. That is a huge performance gain. But we're still a little bit behind the Ryzen in terms of gaming performance. It's still very close, right? To where it's not like a huge gap anymore, which is the big thing, I think, that a lot of people, when they're making a decision, oh, if it's only 5-10%, okay, whatever, if it's 20%, if it's 50%, like, okay, that really makes the buying decision easy. But when it's only a few percent difference, then it makes it so that it comes down to more just like which laptop is on sale. Then you go with that one, So I think that's a pretty big win in that sense. That said, let's see what we get in The Witcher 3. So the Intel Arc from the 185H got 4437, AMD got 5938. So we're going to see if we can beat 59. Now let me check the settings that we used. For Witcher 3, we did low, FSR2 on performance. All right. So let's go ahead and set our video settings. Graphics are set to low. FSR2 set to performance. You could go down to ultra performance as well. Let me make sure I saved that. Yeah, sometimes this menu gets all buggy. Okay. There are technically some other settings down here that you can turn off and make it even lower, but we're not going to mess with that. Render resolution, we need 2560 by 1600, unlimited. No frame generation. We'll want full screen, I believe. In general, with the Intel Arc and the drivers around it, I recommend full screen. I think you're going to get better performance on average in full screen. All right, so our last comparison game, and then we got 5 other new games to test with the 285H. Go to the end here. All right. Okay, so you can see right now we're hitting 60 FPS right now, which is a huge performance gain from 44. Am I in the right screen? Make sure I'm in the right screen. So 58 FPS right now. Here we go. Let's go ahead and run the test. Keep in mind this is without frame gen, so if they ever incorporate frame gen, you could still get really good FPS in this, probably over 100 with frame gen. And it would look good. You could actually utilize probably the limitless scaling in this right now with 2x frame gen to get smoother frame rate. So The Witcher 3 doing 60/52. Okay, and jumping over, here you can see the 185H 4437. So we're looking at a 16 FPS gain for the average and a 15 FPS gain for the 1% lows. And for the Ryzen, we're doing 58 FPS on average and 38 for the 1% lows. So we're talking about a win here for the Intel Arc in The Witcher 3. So we're actually getting a solid win in gaming performance. At least from a 1% low perspective, the average FPS is pretty close. Only 2 FPS difference, not a big difference there. But 16 FPS gain for average. Again, you know, we're looking at calculator. 16 divided by 44. 36% improvement in performance. So when you are comparing the 185H with the Intel Arc previous gen versus this new 140T Intel Arc, the new 140T Intel Arc, I'd say is 35 to 50% faster, somewhere in that range, in terms of real gaming performance at realistic settings. Because you know the benchmarks that Intel gave us in their press briefing or whatever, they actually said 22%, which I think is a lower performance gain than you would get realistically. And maybe that's because they were playing the games on medium settings without upscaling being involved. I don't know. But let's just try standing in one place. We'll record FPS value, 60, 56. Let's switch FSR to XeSS, if I can. I think I may have just crashed it. No? Okay. XeSS. Performance. All right. Now let's see what we're getting. With XeSS, we get an additional 7 frames per second. So, you know, we're looking at a nice additional performance gain of 7 FPS if you switch to XeSS scaling, which should work better with the Intel Arc scaling as well compared to FSR. So that's part of where maybe some of the performance gains are being left on the table, that Intel XeSS has not been incorporated into as many applications. That said, visually speaking, FSR2 might provide slightly better visuals. So you got to decide, you know, would you like more FPS or maybe slightly better upscaling? Smoother gameplay versus clearer gameplay, one of those trade-offs that you might have to make. So very interesting result. We've got 5 more games to test. Let's hop into the next game. Did I put the results into the sheet yet? Witcher 3, no, we had 60 60/53, I believe. I gotta double check. $52. Okay. 52. All right. Marvel Rivals is next. So Marvel Rivals, of course, is one of the new competitive shooters. Kind of a replacement in my tests compared to Apex Legends. I might be using Rivals instead of Apex Legends in the benchmarks going forward. Mainly because Apex Legends has fallen out of popularity recently. Less players are playing it, and a lot of players are quitting it. So might transition away into Marvel Rivals as my kind of ghost esports testing. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So checking out chat. Looks like you guys have been active in chat. It was a little busy. Okay. Can't wait for the G14 with the 5070 Ti and the AI9 CPU, 12 gig VRAM, and that processor is endgame. I mean, it'll play games great for sure. Any solution for stutters? Stutter solution. You're gonna have to be more clear because stutters can be caused by so many different things. It can be caused by overheating. It can be caused by things going on in the background, malware on your computer. Or it can be just your hardware is not powerful enough, or maybe you need to turn your settings down if you're stuttering in games. Maybe you need to update your drivers. There's so many different reasons why your game might be stuttering, so you gotta give me more context, all right? Okay, so taking a look at Marvel Rivals, this is a new competitive first-person shooter, kind of like Overwatch. We're going to do Intel XeSS ultra performance for. We could do performance. We can turn on or off frame gen. We'll start with it off, and I'll turn it on for you. We'll show FPS. VSync is off. Okay. Let's go ahead and start a quick match. Yeah, sweet. Okay, here we go. So you can see, I didn't get to show you the settings because I was on the wrong screen. But we are in QHD+, so that's 2560 by 1600. We have Intel XeSS on performance. I'm going to show you it again here in a moment. We have frame generation from Intel Xe off currently. Do I want to do... Oh, someone already took him. Who do I want to play? Should I do Winter Soldier? We'll do Winter Soldier. All right, so you can see things look pretty clear right now. And display-wise, 2560 by 1600, Intel XeSS performance mode is our upscaling. No frame generation. We have XeLL for low latency enabled. It's kind of like NVIDIA Reflex. But Intel version. And you can see we're getting 48 FPS right now, all right? If we switch it to ultra performance, now we're getting 64, 68. Ultra performance, it definitely is a lower resolution, and you can see the detail falling off a bit. So that's the downside, okay? But if I was to actually play this seriously and try to shoot, those extra, right now, 20 or so FPS, it makes a difference going from performance to ultra performance. Because right now, this thing is feeling smooth. It's feeling good. I don't really know this character very well. Do I need to lead shots with this character? I have a feeling I do. Let me turn this down a little bit. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I need to lead. Okay, is there a heal? Yeah, here you go. I might need to switch characters because I don't know this character very well. Oh my goodness. I was playing so much better on the other character. That other guy was so low. I don't know how to use his ultimate, but oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna change character to a different one. Let's see here. What do I go to? Let's go to. Let's try Black Widow. We'll see if I can aim with Black Widow. So 50 FPS, 32 for 1% low. Not great 1% low performance. If I can kill their healer, that would help us a lot. I can't believe I'm close ranging with Widow right now. I should switch to the. I should have switched to the bat or whatever. I don't play Marvel Rivals that much. I've only played a little bit, so. I just know the Punisher is the main character that I know. Can I jump on here? Okay, so there's a nice little triple snipe combo. Nice. I'm about to die. That's not good. Next shot gets the kill. All right. So 52 FPS in actual match. 34 for 1% low. On low settings. It makes the game playable, but it's not great right now. I'm gonna be honest. It's good. Let's try turning on frame gen. See how that feels. All right. There, 79 FPS. Oh, but there's definitely an input latency delay that makes it harder to aim. I still can aim pretty well, though. I don't know what my ultimate does as Black Widow, but the FPS smoothness is better. But I think the response rate is too. The latency increase is too much for me to be able to be happy with it. Okay, so let's try turning off frame gen again. Let's try Spider-Man. Okay, where do I go? E and F. All right, let's see if we can. see if I can take out this healer. This is difficult to play Spider-Man. Oh my god. Okay, I've got my ultimate in Spider-Man. Let's try to use that and then we'll call it a day. So right now we're 70, 39 in this little room. Let's see. Let's see if I can use my ultimate as Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure you just gotta be near the enemies to use that.
Only 60 seconds left.
They don't care about people, just the people writing their checks. Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man! Yeah, too sticky for you.
All right, we're getting some damage in. 65 FPS. You know, this is good enough to get at least a basic level of enjoyable gameplay. All right, this is definitely not as good as Counter-Strike 2, where you're getting closer to 100, 120 FPS, but it's good enough to be like, I can go in, get some kills, have some fun with my friends, and get a smooth gameplay experience, well, not super smooth. So I'd say Marvel Rivals, it's a good example where frame gen makes the game smoother, but input latency is still too much for you to really use it in a competitive gaming scenario. Okay, so next up is Dying Light 2. I'm not sure how to put the FPS in Marvel Rivals, right? Because it was all over the place. We were getting 45 up to 70 without frame gen. With frame gen, we were doing like 70 to 80. I don't know, in that range. We're gonna call it for Rivals. We're just gonna say 60. Rough average, because it was all over the place.
At any time, the smallest flap of the butterfly's wings may set.
Okay. Dying Light 2, of course, has a benchmark that you can use, which we're going to leverage in this next test. Maybe refresh chat again, see if I can answer any questions. Is liquid metal dangerous because it can spill? I would say liquid metal can be dangerous if the application was not done correctly, but I think the amount of times that it actually fails is pretty low, and when it does fail, it usually will fail soon after the application was applied, and usually not super later on. When it's applied right, it should last a long time. Like in theory, though, I would say it does add a little bit of danger to your laptop because it can spill and cause a short, okay? All right, so we are doing very low quality with XeSS on performance, okay? We're going to enable that, we're going to save that, we're going to restart the game, and we'll start the test. Uh, 6800M should be on par with the 3070. Pretty close to that, I believe. Depends on the game, obviously. So Ariane says, I have a ROG G16 with a 4060 and an i7-13650HX. So that's a good combination. If you're struggling and your games are stuttering, I would make sure the biggest things are to make sure that your game is on. You want to make sure that your gaming laptop is set to high performance mode in the fan mode. You want to make sure that you're plugged in. You want to make sure you update your drivers. And then if you're still struggling with stutters, the first thing I would do is turn off ray tracing or turn it down. And then also check your textures. Make sure your textures are set to a reasonable level. All right, that's the other thing. If your textures are too much and your VRAM is being used up, then that can be causing stutters for you. So set your textures to medium or low if you need to. Okay, so here we are. Dying Light 2, this has no frame gen. The 1% low is off here, but we're going to get an overall average FPS. Right now it's about 41. This does have frame gen if you use NVIDIA, but currently not if you're on Intel or AMD. Unless, of course, you use something like limitless scaling to incorporate frame gen unofficially with the app. But 41 FPS, things are looking smooth. Detail is looking pretty good overall. And this is a single player game. So 41 FPS should be good enough to get a reasonable gaming experience on this Intel Arc 140T. MHW, Monster Hunter Wilds benchmark. Yeah, I have Monster Hunter Wilds, the actual full game, and we'll try loading it up. So you're going to actually be able to see it in action. It's not really playable, unfortunately. It's one of the only games, it's one of the only modern games I've found that's not playable, even on the lowest settings. Ditson says, my first ever gaming laptop will be the 5080 Zephyrus G16. I've always had a desktop PC and running 2080 Ti and i9-99K for 6 years now. Still going strong. Surely a 5080 mobile is more than the 2080 Ti. Yeah, it will be. You'll have a big performance gain there. 42.97 FPS. So 43 FPS in Dying Light 2. So that's good. And let's see. Here we go. Let me go ahead and put that in here. Dying Light 2. 43 FPS. Next up is Hogwarts Legacy. So this, of course, being one of the most popular games of 2023, and still a very, very popular game today. It's, I think, very important for the Intel Arc to perform well in a game like Hogwarts Legacy because of how popular it is. So let's see how well we perform now inside Hogsmeade. We're going to be in Hogsmeade, which is the most dense NPC area of the game. So it's going to be very interesting to see the level of performance that we get. So let's check out our settings. 2560 by 1600 Intel XeSS, currently on ultra performance. Uncapped frame rate, no VSync. All right, everything here is turned off. And we're set to low with medium textures, no ray tracing. All right, let's load up the game. Oh, I'm showing you the graphical settings without showing you the graphical settings. But everything's on low with Intel Xe upscaling. So let's go here. Intel XeSS Ultra Performance. We can try changing it to a few different settings here to see what we're like. All these things are turned off, and we're set to low with medium textures. All right, you can see we're using 26 gigs of our RAM here too. That's a lot. All right. Okay, so we're going to first do our little run through up through the road here. And we do have pedestrians set to low. So there's less pedestrians in here because of the lower settings. But normally, if you run it, or if you were to run it on high, there would be even more people. But there still is quite a few NPCs here compared to most of the world. But right now, 46 FPS, 32401% low, even though this is our first run. No frame generation right now. These are all just upscaled. You can certainly see that the ultra performance level of Hogwarts right now, the detail around the hair and face and everything, it's pretty low resolution. You know, like the upscaling is not super, super clear. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people would want to set it to be performance or balanced instead. But let's try our ultra performance test run first, and then we'll try maybe balanced. All right, so 45 FPS, 29.1% low so far. I mean, the thing is, the game is playing pretty dang smooth. The average is there. the stutters are honestly less than some dedicated GPU gaming laptops, which is really weird because some high-performance RTX 4090 laptops, for example, would have a 1% low of 7 or something like that. So 4530 is really good, I think. All right, we'll try some, and that shows that this thing is actually really playable. Hogwarts Legacy is actually really playable because this is going to be the most graphically demanding area of the game. So you know, it's impressive to me. This is a big step forward probably for Intel Arc because I don't think the previous version of Intel Arc would have been a very good gaming experience here. Probably. Let's try performance first, and then we'll try balanced. So let's run around for a moment. So keep in mind we were doing 45, and we're still doing 45 or 44, 43. Okay, a little bit less. All right, our 1% low. Okay, our 1% low is still pretty close to the same. So 4127, and the detail is a lot better than it was. Let's try balanced now. Balanced. And let's see what we get on balanced. So the detail is, of course, even better around the hair and all the NPCs and everything. We'll do a run through the city. 40 FPS on average right now. 1% low, a little bit lower at 21. But things are still pretty dang smooth. You could still easily consider this playable, but it's not as buttery smooth as 4530, right? 4025, basically a 5 FPS reduction across the board there. Still leaves you with a playable experience, but now the detail around the characters and the fine detail is going to be a lot better for a bigger gaming screen experience, you know, so that's good. Last, let's just switch it to, I'm curious, if we go to quality. Quality should provide much better graphical fidelity, but also the FPS, I can tell the FPS, I mean, it's still playable, but now it's getting to the point where maybe it's a little choppy. I don't know. It's not too bad, I guess. You know, it's still above 30 consistently, so maybe you can still play actually on quality. You know, so very interesting. Let's see what the cutscene looks like when we go talk to this guy. Very good detail and clarity around the character itself. You know, so I think most people would be very happy playing the game, probably either in a variety, either quality if you want a little less FPS, or maybe go down to performance or ultra performance if you want a smooth gaming experience. I like that there's options. Okay, the fact that it's just purely playable, it's a big step forward. Okay. Because Intel Arc last gen, I think would have struggled a lot more with running that. Okay, so next game, Black Myth Wukong. Let's see if we can play Black Myth Wukong. This is another very demanding game that is not, I think, would not be considered playable on the previous generation of Intel Arc. So let's see how it does in this gen. Okay. Mars says, this is awesome. It'll be a very busy year, Giz. When will you have the 50 laptops? Probably before the end of the month is probably when I'm going to get them, around the end of March. Might be early April is when I'll be able to get the first ones in and start testing them on live streams and everything. What's up, Lance? How's life in Houston? I'm out here in Thailand now, so very different out here. Ditson says they have been delayed 1 month, so end of March has been pushed to end of April. Yeah, well, I was supposed to get the laptops early March or late February or something like that before, and now it's going to be late March, early April, as far as I understand. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out our settings that we've got. It's set to borderless right now, 2560 by 1600, no frame cap, motion blur off. Graphics settings, we have it set to lowest, so most upscaling with FSR, but there's also XeSS, TSR, and NXSR. I'm not sure what NXSR, that's a new one to me. XeSS. With FSR, we can turn on frame gen. Very interesting. We have frame gen as an option here. Should we try frame gen with FSR? Let's try that. Okay, let's apply graphical changes. Oh, I just ran benchmark. I'm not even sure what the benchmark is going to be running. I don't know what the settings are the benchmark is going to be running under, so this might be interesting. Intel Core Ultra 9 versus i9-14900HK. Do you mean HK or HX? All right, so I don't know what settings these are on, so I'm going to just back out because it's kind of a waste of time if we don't know the exact settings. Because I was in the middle of changing them, and I'm not sure if they applied before it started the test or not. So, all right. So frame generation was off. Let's apply graphical changes, which is T, not tab. Tab is to run the benchmark. All right, we have low graphics preset, no ray tracing, FSR enabled at the lowest render resolution with frame generation enabled. Let's see what we get in Black Myth Wukong. You meant HX. Yeah, so the 14900HX versus the Core Ultra 9 285H, that one is going to be a, I believe what you mean is HX in both of those situations, and that would be a good test. The H, which is what we're testing today, is significantly smaller CPU designed for thinner laptops, right? So that's what we're testing today. Wow, we're hitting 49 FPS, 40 for our 1% low. Keep in mind, we have frame gen FSR3 right now on, so it looks good in this slower paced, not action-y area. Pretty sure if you were to actually try to fight with frame gen on with this low of FPS, you'd run into a lot of visual artifacts, okay? But overall, this is looking still very playable. I mean, so far. I mean, it looks like the game itself, the detail on the rocks and the grass looks very high resolution and good detail overall. Especially if you were to use this Intel Arc, say in a mobile handheld on a smaller screen, like the MSI Claw, for example, the Claw 8 with this GPU in it, it could be a very good visual clarity experience, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Udit, he is playing game on which laptop? We're using the Lenovo Ideapad Pro 5i, which is the kind of, for an Ideapad, it's pretty premium actually. Traditionally Ideapads were a bit more budget friendly, at least on the gaming side of things, like the Ideapads. But the Pro 5i has always been more of a premium lineup. This doesn't have a dedicated GPU in it, so typically I wouldn't usually review this. But since the Intel Arc 140T is actually a very gaming capable GPU, as we're seeing right here, it becomes a lot more interesting to me from a reviewing perspective. 285HX versus the 14900HX. We should see some performance improvements. Don't know how much yet, but it should be some performance improvements. 49 FPS on average right there it's good. It's really good. Let's show to the settings screen. Let's turn off frame gen and use Intel XeSS and see what kind of FPS we get. Because I'm pretty sure that's going to give us the actual realistic scenario that we'd want to use. XeSS will apply the graphical settings, and we'll run the tab, run the benchmark. Pro Day 83 with the donation. I don't know, RSD5, I don't know how much that is, but it doesn't matter. Thank you so much for the support. He says, just a small donation for all your effort. Love your videos, man. Really helpful in a lot of ways. Keep up with a great job. Can't wait to see the new NVIDIA 5000 series on laptops. Thanks for the support. I really appreciate it. Whoa, we're actually getting almost the same FPS. At least we were. We were getting over 50 initially, but we were just looking at the ground, I guess. 4239 without frame gen. So frame gen was only adding 10 FPS, I guess. Hardly any at all. 4439. 39 is excellent for a 1% low as well. So, I mean, this stayed pretty consistent throughout the benchmark last time. I just want to get into some gameplay. Oh, I can't. I need to finish this. I need to finish it. I need to take the time to finish this out, and then we can move to Monster Hunter Wilds. You guys will get to see how that game performs. So Monster Hunter Wilds, we can talk a little bit about that before we go into it. Have any of you played Monster Hunter Wilds? It's really good storytelling, a really cool world. I've played it like 5 or 6 hours now, I think. Really demanding graphics that are not very optimized. Like my RTX 4090 is, it struggles unless you enable DLSS. And especially if you don't have frame gen on, it struggles to get over like, I think it's like 70, 80 FPS or something without frame gen. With frame gen, I think we're talking about 120 with the 4090 on ultra settings. So it's still playable, but only on the highest end hardware if you really want to get great FPS. So pretty sure you're going to need to wait for another generation of Intel Arc graphics before Monster Hunter Wilds becomes playable. Or maybe for some better optimization from the devs for Monster Hunter Wilds, because they just did not optimize that game to play well on low-end hardware. There's so many complaints from the users who have actually very good hardware that are only maybe 3 or 4 years old, that are good specs, and they still can't play the game well. So yeah, it's not just the Intel Arc people that are going to be struggling to play Monster Hunter Wilds. It's NVIDIA and AMD folks as well that just have 2 or 3 gens old stuff. So 43 FPS on average in the benchmark in Black Myth Wukong. Low settings, XeSS at 25% upscaling. I wonder if the 9950 HX3D is better than the 285HX. That's one of the big questions that I want to answer this year in all the benchmarking. Let's load into a fight real quick and see how this does in actual combat. To be honest, Monster Hunter Wilds is bad in performance for everyone. Yeah, unless you've got unless you're pushing, say, over 15,000 in time spy graphics, you're not going to be having a great time in Monster Hunter Wilds in terms of like 100 plus FPS, you know? So here we are. Actual gameplay, Black Myth Wukong. Let's go get into a fight. Averaging 48 FPS so far. Let's see here. Space is the dodge. I don't, I'm not particularly great at this game. It's kind of like Elden Ring. So 45 FPS in an actual fight. 1% lows of 40 is really good. I mean, especially for integrated graphics card in the latest, this is one of the most popular latest modern games, okay? And the graphics look pretty good. I mean, you obviously could upscale a little bit less for a little better clarity, and we could try that. Let's try doing 50% upscaling instead of 25%. 50%. All right. 50% upscaling. Now things are looking much clearer. but also our FPS, we just doubled the render resolution essentially. And our 1% low is still over 30, so this is still playable, but it just doesn't look quite as smooth. I'd probably play it like this though, because I just need to see a basic timings and reaction. I don't know. Maybe you'd want a little bit more FPS. It's up to you, but the option's there, depending on what you want. Okay, time to go into Monster Hunter Wilds, and you guys get to see the glorious FPS and super good graphics that this game has. Bro, please review the Lenovo Legion Slim 5 Gen 9 4060 with the 8845HS. Did I review that one? I feel like I might. I know I reviewed the Slim 5. Probably with a 4060. You might want to go check out my video history because I may have reviewed that exact one or something very, very close to it. Intel 285HX, 160 watt max power meanwhile, the 9955HX 3D is 75 watt maximum. I'm pretty sure that's going to pull more than 75 watts. Pretty sure it'll be closer to 100, but we'll see. Okay, so checking out our options. All right, lowest graphics settings. FSR 3 currently, but we could do Intel XeSS. Yes, we'll do Intel XeSS. All right, changing the graphics, upscaling. Might crash us. Nice. Upscaling. Ultra performance. Nice. Everything is set to the lowest quality, okay? And let's start game. Let's see if we can get basic gameplay. Maybe this would be the point where it's playable enough if you're using a small screen, like on a handheld. But on a big screen device, I'm pretty sure this is not going to be. Let's see. When I tested it before, I was using FSR, so maybe that scales it worse or better. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. No. Okay. No. I remember about correct. 24 FPS. Oof. And everything. Like look at my character. It may look good on the screen. Just look at my character when we get close. All right. That is not very good detail. All right. Like look at the monster in the background. It seems like the monster in the background is only about 15 pixels across. Okay. So, all right, so we're averaging 22 FPS. And my cat's eyes, I think, are all 1 pixel. All right? Like, the graphics are so good in this game. Yeah. But seriously, the graphics actually are pretty good if you actually have proper hardware. But technically, 22 FPS. This technically 24 FPS right now. We're running out into the wild area. I could theoretically play this game. Like if you're desperate enough and you want to play, you could play. It is technically playable, but it's about as bad as it gets in terms of graphics. Like I feel like I'm playing a PlayStation 1, maybe PlayStation 2, somewhere in between PlayStation 1 and 2 in terms of graphics. It's that low of resolution. I don't know. I was testing the different weapons, and I do not know this weapon very well. So let's see if we can get into a fight. Okay. We're booping him. We're bopping him. 27 FPS. Nice. Now we're running on the bird. Yeah, so that's Monster Hunter Wilds. You're looking right in the low 20s, I guess, for an average. 24 FPS on average right now. Let's go ahead and quit. There we go. All right. So I don't even think we need to do the benchmark because it's not going to really show you anything different. It's going to be more of the same there. Okay, so Black Myth Wukong. What should we put for our value for Black Myth Wukong? For the benchmark, let me check what we actually got. I think it was 43. Yeah, 43. Okay. 43. Monster Hunter Wilds. We'll put 24. All right. So let's summarize everything we found out about the Intel Core Ultra 9 in a little summary here. All right, I'm going to put this on the right side, and I'm going to sit a little more this way. Okay. All right, so over here, this is our 285H processor benchmark results. Over here is the Intel Core Ultra 9 185H benchmark results, along with the Ryzen AI 9 HX370. Now, we'll try to put these into a better graph for the final video. But we can still get a good summary results, all right? So important difference between these test results and this test result is that the Lenovo Ideapad, I believe, had a slightly lower power limit when engaging in long-term, high-performance demanding tasks. So the Zephyrus G16 over here, we're doing more like 80, 90 watts a lot. Over here, we're boosting up to a higher wattage temporarily and then coming down to, I believe, 65 by the end. But oftentimes around 80 and then eventually down to 65. So like 100, 105 watts, then down to 80, 85 watts, then down to 65 watts eventually for the really long power limit. So the Speedometer browser speed testing, we did much faster in the 285H. Geekbench also showed big improvements, jumping up to 2875, basically matching the single core performance of the Ryzen chip, but beating the multi-core performance of the Ryzen chip there in Geekbench. With the GPU score, Intel had a huge gain from 27,000 up to 43,000, beating the AMD Ryzen up, which only scored 42,700. So pretty impressive. Geekbench, at least in theory, I don't love Geekbench just because it doesn't really use the CPU and the GPU as well as what I think it should during a benchmarking scenario, but maybe it's good for realistic real-world use scenario. Handbrake, Intel had some nice performance gains, dropping several seconds off of the raw render time, not quite beating the AMD render speed, but close. Intel QSV mode, however, was faster with Handbrake than AMD, and we also shaved off 4 seconds off that time, so about an 8 to 9% performance improvement for the media encoder, QSV, of course, meaning Intel QuickSync video encoding, beating out the AMD VCN video encoding. In Divinci Resolve, however, AMD was still faster at 1 minute and 12 seconds versus the 1 minute and 19 seconds of the new chip. So about 7 seconds faster for the Ryzen chip for media encoding in Divinci Resolve, but very close. And it helped close the gap between Intel and AMD in Divinci Resolve. Not quite completely closing it, but making it pretty close. Cinebench R20, R23, and R24, the Ryzen chip was ahead pretty consistently. And the Intel chip actually fell behind a little bit. When we did long-form testing, when we did short burst testing, the 285H was ahead, But then as we continually tested with multiple runs, eventually the 285H fell a little bit behind, again, because of the different power limits within the two laptops is the best that I understand it. 8 to 64 RAM speed test, very close in terms of performance, with some gains and losses in the read, write, copy, and latency. Overall, I think it's pretty much not that important because there wasn't a significant difference. You're not going to really notice that type of memory speed in real life, real world testing. It's just not going to make a huge difference. Baldur's Gate 3, we had 45 FPS and 33 for a 1% low with the Intel Arc. And that's a huge boost, particularly to 1% low, because the 1% low before was only 13, which rendered, I mean, it was playable before, but there was a lot of little stutters here and there as the CPU caught up to all the characters moving around. The new Intel Arc, the data flowed much better through the game engine, and we had much smoother overall game performance with a 1% low of 33 versus 13. Huge gain there. AMD, of course, being a little bit ahead of the Intel Arc at 4935, but not by much. It's to where it's like you'd be hard to tell a difference. Counter-Strike 2, very similar performance, about 20 FPS more with the new Intel Arc, so about a 25% performance gain there. Cyberpunk 2077, 49 FPS versus 37 from the previous gen Intel Arc. Again, nice performance gain, 12 FPS gain there, about 33% performance increase. Still behind the AMD chip though, but that is with FSR. If we were to change up the benchmark and use XeSS in the benchmark instead, I think it'd probably be a lot closer. God of War, 43 FPS versus 30. See, God of War, 43 FPS versus 28. So huge performance gain again for Intel Arc with this generation, making the game so much more playable, much smoother in real-world scenarios for gaming. Almost matching, not quite matching the AMD Ryzen chip, still out ahead by about 5 FPS. In The Witcher 3, we have 60 FPS versus 44, and so that's another huge gain for Intel with the new Intel Arc, because that means 16 FPS increase. And then when we switched it from FSR into Intel XeSS upscaling, the visual quality did go down a little bit, but the performance gain went up even higher, up to 66, 67 FPS. So, I mean, I think one of the issues to keep in mind here is that Intel XeSS is not in as many games as FSR. So if the performance in the Intel Arc is better when you're using XeSS, then it's important for Intel to collaborate with game developers and get Intel XeSS into more games, because the Intel super sampling will provide a performance boost for Intel Arc users. In this case, jumping from FSR to XeSS gave us about a 10% performance boost, which may be enough to close the gap between the AMD Radeon 890M versus the Intel Arc 140T. So The Witcher 3 was the only game that we tested today where we had a clear, like an actual win officially for the Intel Arc for the direct head-to-head comparison. But overall, the Intel Arc graphics definitely closed the gap in terms of overall playability. Like the Intel Arc previous gen and the 185H, it just, you could play most modern games, but it'd be a lot choppier and maybe not an ideal gaming experience. In the new 140T Arc, it really is capable of playing almost all the modern games except Monster Hunter Wilds, though I doubt the Radeon 890M could do Monster Hunter Wilds either. I could check on the ROG Ally X, but it's probably still not very playable. Technically, that's not even technically the same CPU, but it's very similar, or same GPU. Now, we did Marvel Rivals. It was all over the place in terms of FPS, anywhere from 45 up to 70, 80, depending on if you have frame generation enabled, about 60 probably on average without frame gen on ultra performance. And the game is definitely playable, but for a first-person shooter, I definitely prefer to get over 90 FPS. if you really want to have smooth, consistent aiming. So not quite enough for an ideal Marvel's experience, but still good enough to have a fun time. Dying Light 2 zombie game, 43 FPS in the benchmark. Hogwarts Legacy, 45-30, very smooth. Very good gameplay experience, possible to upscale a little bit more, jumping out of performance, maybe to balanced mode or something, and still having a good gameplay experience. Black Myth Wukong, also very good gameplay experience, 43 FPS on average with very consistent 1% lows. Monster Hunter Wilds, super low detail, very low FPS, barely maybe playable at 24 FPS on average. So in summary, the new Intel Arc 140T, very playable in all the modern titles except Monster Hunter Wilds, and huge performance gains across the board. If we were to average these out, I think we're looking at about a 30 to 35 performance gain improvement in general gaming, which is even more than the 22% performance gain improvement that Intel claimed. So that is probably the biggest positive for the 285H. Unfortunately, we did not see improvements in Cinebench, which is probably the most disappointing thing in the test today. But again, different thermal power limits directly affect sorry, let me say that again. Thermal power limits directly affect performance. And if the previous generation that we were testing here had slightly better thermals, that may make a bigger difference than the silicon change in the new 285H in terms of multi-core rendering. But clearly, the multi-core score in Cinebench R23, R20, R24, that's not the whole story. There's a whole lot more going on here, from the media encoder to Geekbench, Speedometer, and gaming, that I would say the 285H is a significant performance gain, particularly if you're very interested in gaming especially. So from a gaming perspective, it's a huge leap forward, a huge improvement, and definitely makes an Intel Arc only laptop a potentially viable casual gaming experience, especially if you're playing more lighter weight titles. And if you're going to use the Intel Arc 140T and something like the MSI Claw, which is a handheld, small screen, the upscaling doesn't matter as much and the lower settings don't matter as much, it's going to be a much better experience than the original Claw. The original Claw, you're going to struggle to run a lot of modern games smoothly enough to have a great time. The new one, definitely going to be able to play like 99% of games at least at 40 plus FPS on average, including almost all the modern titles, with a couple of exceptions like Monster Hunter Wilds. So anyway, let me check chat and then we'll end the live stream. Okay. Pretty good for no dedicated GPU. That's what I'm thinking. It's a big step up, especially compared to the previous generation. When can we expect the next review? I'd like to see the Ryzen 395 on max power. I need to follow up with Asus again, see if I can get them to send me. They're supposed to send it to me. They're supposed to send me the Flow Z13. They were supposed to send it to me a couple months ago, and they still haven't been able to send it out here to Thailand. So we'll have to see if I can get it shipped over to me. I would love to review it. I'd love to check it out. Does the 285H have hyper-threading? Good question. I believe it does. I didn't really pay attention to it close enough. Pulling it up. That's interesting. Because maybe not. Because usually there's threads. Does it not have hyperthreading? I don't think they may have dropped it. Does Intel Core Ultra 9 285? Let's see here. I don't think it does. That's interesting. Yeah, no hyperthreading. So here you can see Intel. Here's Intel's official spec page: 16 cores, 16 threads. That's that is probably the reason why Cinebench R23, R20, and R24 scored less. But that's probably also the reason why we're getting some nice performance gains in other areas. Because single core performance will likely be better if the cores are not hyper-threaded. So you lose a little multi-core performance for single core performance gains is the way I would think about that. But that's a great observation and point to keep in mind. Pro Day says, when can we expect a similar AMD Strix Point 395 Plus? I hope soon. I'm waiting for it to come in. I see Monster Hunter is playing great, but not great detail. LOL, yeah. Yeah, we were waiting for that Flow Z13. There's no hyperthreading in last gen of Intel CPUs too? Yeah, that may be true. Checking the 185H. No, they had hyperthreading. In the 185H, there was hyperthreading. You can see 16 cores, but 22 threads because the performance cores were hyperthreaded. So the 185H did have hyperthreading, giving the performance cores essentially more multi-core processing performance. But when you're splitting the cores into 2 threads, it's not going to be as effective for something like gaming or single core thread performance. Okay, so that's it for this live stream. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was informative. I think it was a good overall test. I don't think we messed up the testing anyway. And I'm overall very impressed from a gaming perspective with Intel's strides forward. And I'm hoping it gets better and better as they get their drivers on point, get Intel XeSS incorporated in more games, and especially the new XeSS 2 with frame generation and the low latency improvement. Because if you put those 2 things into a lot of these games, maybe we could see, like The Witcher 3 going from 60 FPS up to 90/100 on the same GPU with still a very good gaming experience because it's a single player game and you don't really care about a little bit of latency. And then you're talking about like really, really smooth gameplay from an integrated GPU, which I think is certainly possible if they can incorporate. And I just feel like Intel needs to hire like a whole double, triple their driver and game developer support team and just really push out a lot more XeSS 2 support in way, way more games. Because NVIDIA and AMD are both better at that right now, at pushing out DLSS 4 support, DLSS 3 support, FSR 3 support, and FSR 4 support, along with the frame generation. And if Intel can get on top of that, they'll be a lot more competitive, especially in the handheld gaming segment right now where the AMD Ryzen chips have a bit of an advantage because they're running FSR and that's native to their hardware. And I think that gives a slight performance edge because the drivers and the upscaling is all designed catered directly to their hardware, and they're not adopting, other types of scaling tech onto their own tech, which is currently what's happening in a lot of titles for the Intel Arc, because you're using FSR, like in God of War, with Intel tech, but if they had XeSS in God of War, we're talking about another little performance bump, maybe another 10% performance bump or something like that. At least I would hope. Maybe the graphical fidelity also goes down a little bit in that scenario, but you also get a performance gain, which I think giving end users more options for trade-offs with graphics versus performance is a good thing. And yeah, and speaking of which, I do want to make a live stream, probably my next live stream, maybe on the limitless scaling, it's called. It's this little utility that I discovered through one of the comments on my last live stream, which lets you do frame generation on any GPU, on any hardware, including the Intel Arc, in almost any game. So it allows you to also do multi-frame generation, 4 times multi-frame generation. It's going to get way more buggy and artifacty unless you have really high base frame rate. So that's the main downside. I don't know. I'm debating about how useful it is, but I think it's a cool utility because it costs $7 and allows an RTX 4000 series or 3000 series to use frame gen and to even use multi-frame gen. So if you already have a good 80, 60 to 90, say, FPS as your base frame rate, you can now boost that up to 150, 200 with the frame gen. So very interesting tool that I think a lot of you would love to use. So I'm going to do a tutorial and break down and test maybe 10 games with it for the next live stream. So lossless scaling, not limitless, lossless scaling. It's on Steam. So see you in the next one. I'm excited. Brandon.